All right, everybody. Hi, I'm Devin Johnston. Over there is actually the other half of R9 Hive and Honey. Um, Today, I'm mostly going to be focusing on Africanized honeybees. While I love my native honeybees and I love trying to photograph them, trying is the optimal word here, our specialization really is in the European or the Western honeybee. Um, Really, the reason why I want to focus today on the Africanized honeybee in particular is not only do we have them, so we have to love them, is also because you guys will be the most likely people here in the Valley to encounter them at the most inopportune opportunities. So when you're working outside, if you're just existing in the Valley, you will encounter the Africanized honeybee. So we're going to go a little bit over Africanized honeybee biology and how it is different and similar to our regular European types of genetic, because anybody who's been a beekeeper or maybe has lived up north and recently moved down to the valley might not understand that there is a difference between these bees. So we're going to go ahead and start with Africanized honeybees and the history of Africanized honeybees, because the African honeybee and the European honeybee are two different subspecies of what we know as the Western honeybee. Western honeybee, of course, is Apis mellifera, and the African honeybee is Apis mellifera scutitalia. So these bees were specifically bred in the 1950s by a Brazilian scientist, and his goal was to create a really good hardy honeybee that could survive in the tropical areas of the world. The European honeybees, being European, are really used to a more temperate, maybe even a colder climate, versus South America is not known exactly for its snowstorms. So these researchers looked and found that African honeybees, specifically the Cape honeybee and other sub-Saharan honeybees, had the ability to withstand warmer, more consistent weather, but also infrequent rains and just a bit more of an exciting environment. So what happened after doing some research and working with beekeepers in Africa, they had bred African honeybee queens to European drones. They brought these lovely little fellows to Brazil, and as they were going about their experimentation, seeing how well these bees worked in that area, a very helpful assistant accidentally released all the bees. He took off the gate that would prevent the queen from leaving and all the drones from leaving to help the honeybees, but what happened is they very quickly learned that Africanized or African honeybees are a lover of travel. Now, unlike European honeybees, African honeybees love to leave. They just want to go. If something isn't right, they're gone. So these swarms started becoming what is now considered one of the most prolific invasive species that we now know of. And they started spreading throughout the forest. They started going into people's homes. They started just traveling from Brazil, both up and down, until we know where they are now. Of course, they're in all along the southern United States. So these bees moved very, very rapidly. They were originally bred in the 1950s, and it only took 50 years for them to make it thousands of miles to Texas. And one of the first deaths that we knew of from honeybees was in the 90s. So it did not take very long for them to make a significant impact in the way people worked outside. So we're going to cover a little bit about their biology and behavior, how it differs, and how it's the same. So you can see here Africanized honeybees. They are a hybrid of two different subspecies of honeybees versus our European honeybees are different individual species. Typically, when we're talking about European honeybees in terms of commercial or hobbyist bee use, we're talking about an Italian honeybee. And whenever you hear the word Africanized honeybee, African honeybee, or African-derived honeybee, we're mostly talking about bees that have had any sort of crossbreeding with African honeybees. which of course is the Apis mellifera scutitalia. So physically, African honeybees are slightly smaller than European honeybees. A lot of people think that they're bigger. Actually, no, they're more small, slender. However, as a person just looking at them or looking at a colony of them, you're not really going to tell the difference. The difference between the average European and African is only about 10%. For us, visually, it's not a good way to determine whether a bee is Africanized. You have to really measure the entire colony and take averages. They are also more consistent in their colors than you'll find with a lot of European honeybees. For example, Africanized honeybees are known to be slightly darker. Their stripes are more defined. They're kind of tight. They look more like a tiger. And their queens don't always have a distinct coloration compared to her daughters. Versus the European honeybees, most commercial beekeepers now breed and sell these very light, beautiful golden honeybees. They also come in dark black. They do come in stripes. So these ones are more, you're going to find more variety. They're going to be slightly reddish, maybe slightly more blonde. If you can think of it, it's going to be in that. They're going to be different. So African honeybees also really like small nesting sites compared to the European honeybees. So when you think about the environment that these different honeybees will experience, in Africa, you have a more variable flowering season and rain season. It's also warmer. In Europe, you think of needing your big old storage of salted and canned foods. It's the same thing with the bees. So they need a large supply of food to be able to survive a potentially lengthy winter. So European honeybees will want a larger nest site. European honeybees are very picky about their nest sites as well. They want about 40 liters of space in their nest site at an absolute minimum, versus the Africanized honeybees, 10 liters of space, sometimes even less. They'll definitely take larger spaces, but if they can shove a comb in there, the bees will be like, okay, this is good enough, and they'll move right in. They're very opportunistic. And the breeding biology of the Africanized honeybee is slightly different as well. When you think of honeybees and their reproduction, you shouldn't think of the individual bee, hatches from the egg, turns into a worker, forages, and then another bee is born from another egg. That is not the reproduction that we should be thinking of when thinking of bees. When we're talking about honeybees, you need to think of them as a superorganism of sort. So to be able to reproduce, the honeybees aren't thinking about more individual bees being born or hatched. They want more colonies to exist in general. So the Africanized honeybees, like a lot of insects or mammals that live in highly dangerous areas, they're going to focus less on creating bigger, healthier, more independent children, and they want as many children as possible. So Africanized honeybees will create these swarms, essentially their children, more often than a European honeybee will. Africans will create up to 6, 7 swarms in a year, depending on good foraging conditions, good weather conditions, versus the European honeybees. They're going to really wait until they can cast off a large swarm that can take a lot of resources and that will fill up a larger nest site, because the Africanized honeybees, they only need 1 colony to survive, and they're good, maybe 2 colonies to survive. So they can send out 2 smaller ones, 6 smaller ones, 5 smaller ones. As long as a couple of them survive, they're okay. Versus the European honeybees, they really need to focus on that 1 swarm or that 2 swarms that they cast. Both of them have to survive, or else their species couldn't continue. And of course, Africanized honeybees have the lovely and very infamous trait of being more prone to attack people. And a lot of people are under the misconception that it's aggression or they're angry. It's really about defensiveness. When you live in Africa and everything wants to kill you, including the birds, the mammals, the people, other insects, you really get a itchy trigger finger, and you're more willing to go after anything that you think might even have a remote chance of attacking you and hurting your babies, they're going to go for it. Versus the European honeybees, we've been working with them for thousands of years. We've been working them in ancient Egypt, ferrying them across the Nile. We've been working with them in Russia and parts of Asia, in Europe. So these bees, they're used to it. They're like our nice, awesome chickens. You know, we took those, raised them into awesome chickens, and they might pretend, oh no, I'm scared of you, but they're really sweet and they're easy to handle. Africanized honeybees are used to humans coming. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get your honey. I'm going to eat. I'm going to use your comb. I'm going to eat your babies. I'm going to eat your honey. And so they specifically evolved to make sure that humans could not bother them. And so because of that, because they have to be extra defensive and they know that humans aren't going to be helping them, they're going to be hurting them, they have evolved to send out more defensive guards to protect their home. So instead of sending 5, 10, maybe 15 bees, give them a sting, make them walk away, the Africanized honeybees, I'm like, all right, girls, go get them. And they will send hundreds or thousands of bees, not even just guard bees. They'll send the foragers, so they'll send the babies if need be. Everybody go, 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 go. And they will make sure that not only will the intruder get the hint, but they'll get the hint so badly they won't be able to do anything else. So these honeybees really mean business when they go after people. And once again, it is not out of aggression, it is out of fear, because we, especially as humans, have made them that way over the course of thousands of years. And then, of course, along with their more defensive nature, that goes along with what they consider to be their territory. So they will patrol a farther range around their house or their colony than the Europeans will. Europeans will be all crammed together. People can walk around. It's fine. They'll live in the big cities. Africanized bees wants to be alone. No people, no animals. So the swarming behavior, the reproductive behaviors. As I said before, the Africanized honeybees will cast 6 or more swarms per year. And typically a swarm is going to contain anywhere between 30 and 60% of the population. Each of those swarming individuals will consume some of the honey to store in their honey crop. So they're not digesting it immediately. They're just storing it like a bird would. And those bees are going to use that honey, those resources, to then create the comb of their new home. So when they leave, they don't always have a spot picked out already. Especially when it comes to Africanized honeybees, they're going. They're not stopping to think about it and, you know, take their time. No, they're like, okay, we need to get out because the next swarm is coming. We need to get them out so they can utilize this beautiful forage that is happening at this time. So what they're going to do is they're going to rest somewhere outside of the swarm. And it doesn't have to be in the immediate area of the original colony. They'll go quite a distance before they start resting. And that will be called a beard, or we call them a bivouac. They're just resting. The queen, she's big, she's fat, she's pregnant, she has teeny tiny wings. She can't fly very well despite her best efforts. So not only does she need to be rested and fed by the other bees accompanying her, but the worker bees, the scout bees, need the time to look for a new home. They have to vote on that new home, and they have to successfully make it to there. So they're going to be very diligent about how they're going to be working. That way they don't set themselves up for failure by, you know, everybody not voting on the same home or picking a bad home and then it not working. And even Africanized bees, when they are a swarm like this, they're going to be typically very gentle. I'm not saying go up and touch them, especially if you don't have any protection. However, if you see a swarm like that just hanging off of a branch, rest assured they're not coming after you. They have other things to take care of. You are not important right now. They have to take care of their mom or their sister and make sure that they can go to another place. And also, they have nothing to defend. If a honeybee stings you and dies, That's one less honeybee to start this new nest. And the beginning of a nest is very, very labor and energy intensive. And given that energy and food is the most important thing in nature, they want to conserve their energy as much as possible. And and all right, call your parents, guys. Okay, that's what I get for making a joke. uh, now I lost my train of thought. Okay, so they don't have any food and they don't have any babies, so they don't want to risk stinging you and losing a worker who might have been the line between colony success and decline. So at this point, we as beekeepers, this would be actually the most opportune moment to relocate these bees, put them in a box, take them away, especially if they're a swarm inside of a city, to make sure that they're not going to cause a problem for any of us human residents. Because unlike a lot of other things in nature, bees and humans don't mix very well. So this is an example of a swarm that we've captured in Willacy County. As you can see, Africanized bees are not only not picky, but also a little foolish. They don't understand electrical engineering. Nobody gave them that talk. So this right here, this truss was completely energized. And yeah, they just really wanted to burn down the windmills. So they shut down the entire windmill farm connected to that area so we could safely go and get them. They actually had to bring in a big boom lift to lift us up because, of course, it wasn't close to the ground where it was convenient. And we couldn't put a ladder up because everything will kill you there. So they had to lift me up in the air, and we used our little vacuum and we vacuumed them. But a swarm will go literally anywhere. So their nesting behavior, just like their swarms, they will nest everywhere and anywhere, despite our best efforts, or maybe because of the things that we do. So for example, we have to have electrical volts and water meters because of the way that we construct our homes. Bees are like, fantastic, thank you for the house, it's mine now. So water meters are almost mathematically the perfect honeybee nesting site, especially the Africanized bees, because it's not too small, it's not too big, it's very well protected. The plastic insulation is fantastic. The only problem is that sometimes it rains in the valley. Not often, but sometimes it does. And so they will set up colonies in here very quickly. And usually people don't notice that there's bees in there until they mow or until they need their meter serviced or they mow. It's always mowing. Be careful when you mow. So Africanized bees, unlike European honeybees, the ground is beautiful and perfect. That's fine. Who needs to be protected in the air? Not us. So European honeybees really only want to nest in the air. 30 feet is ideal. But you know, they'll give a little bit on that. Africanized honeybees, anything, literally anything. 30 feet in the air, 50 feet in the air, -5 feet under the ground, that's all great for them. Which, yes, it's great for them, but bad for us, because that means not only do we have to be aware of bees in the sky, but now we have to worry about the ground bees. So here's an example of some ground bees. Where are the bees? The top? Upper left? Any other guesses? And this is an example of a hive that we found here in Harlingen near a tree farm. They were doing some work and they were seeing some bee flight and trying to clear it, but they couldn't find the bees. Okay, we're getting a little closer. Still really can't see exactly where the colony is yet. And then sure enough, it was right on the, you see the bottom center where that piece of metal is? Oh, this doesn't have a thingy, does it? No. Okay, right at the bottom there, that's actually the entrance. And so you can see right there all that dead grass overgrew, and we lifted it up, and there wasn't a lot of bee activity because it was cold, so they were all more focused on hiding and staying warm than bothering us. But that we stepped on it before we found it. I think I stepped on it twice before we lifted it up. Had it been midsummer, had these bees been a bit more active, had more bees, and we weren't even in suits. Had we not been in suits, that would have been horrible. Granted, also during summer, we might have had a little bit more flight activity, but that isn't always the case. So if you don't know what's under the grass, just like you would with snakes and other animals, you got to really be careful. Poke the grass a little bit, watch for flight. And so these are also other fantastic examples of colonies that some are hidden in plain sight. Some people knew exactly where they were but hadn't rectified that issue. So for example, this berry tire in Los Fresnos, somebody was clearing some brush, just scooping the brush, clearing it, putting it into big piles. Well, the property owner right next to them, not even close, it was several hundred feet away, had been getting a couple of bee stings, and bees were just coming to their property, and they couldn't figure out why. They looked around their property, couldn't find bees. Sure enough, we walked down the property line where the other property owner had been doing all that under a canal, over a canal, digging through stuff until we finally found bees coming out of the dirt. And we're like, that's weird. Bees don't, what's under there? And sure enough, we found a tire, and we had to cut the tire open. And that colony was very upset because not only did somebody just, take a tractor and ruin their day, but then also we came and ruined it even more. And then the old hive in McAllen, this is a situation where a homeowner knew exactly where the bees were, didn't think it was quite that bad until neighbors had started reporting being attacked by bees, or seeing, I can't remember if they were being attacked by bees, or if the neighbors could see the bee activity. That's how bad it was. And sure enough, when we opened it up, it was several feet long and wide. So it was ginormous. And here's another example of sometimes you don't know you have bees until you really can't have bees around. So this palm tree had actually been destroyed during a bad windstorm. AEP had actually called us out, and we're like, oh, my guys are getting attacked. We need to restore power to this guy's home. He hasn't had power in days. We go, and yeah, sure enough, there was bees in the palm tree. Would the homeowner have known about these bees until it fell on somebody? No, probably not. So this is another example of bees. They will just be everywhere. And here is an example of things that bees will utilize to create homes. So this one was a residential home in McAllen. City of McAllen called us out because they had an abandoned building, and neighbors in the area had tried to mow the empty lot next to it and had gotten stung. So the city called us out to rectify the situation. And so we open it up and like, okay, that's not too bad. It isn't too big. And then we just kept going and going, and it was floor to ceiling. So it was a pier and beam home. So, it started about a foot off the ground and went all the way up to the header at the top, full of beautiful honey, beautiful brood. It was a fantastic hive to have in a box on a ranch, not an abandoned building. And so you can see how it actually extended a little bit higher than it looks in the photo. But yep, and then of course we didn't even have access to the property, so we had to climb the fence. All right. So defensive behaviors, like I said, they're not aggressive. They don't want to hurt you. They want you to go away and leave them alone, which is, I think a lot of us feel the same way. So the African bees were not bred to be gentle. Like I said, they evolved against humans because we kept on going in and destroying their entire hives, versus the European bees, if they would be too defensive or mean or just annoying, the beekeepers or the farmers would cull that genetic, allowing only for the calmest bees to survive. So there's a lot of things that can agitate an African bee. And the biggest one that we find is going to be noise and vibration. So your lawnmower and your tractor and your weed whipper, and anything that you need to keep your property kind of well maintained, the bees don't like. And the guard bees will just be sitting outside watching for you as well. So you could quietly walk by them, and if the bee was threatened by that, a bee could come out and sting you as well. So they use a lot of their senses to figure out whether or not something is a little too scary and need you to go away for. And once, unfortunately, once you do upset these bees, they will follow you. I've had a couple of bees follow me from our property half a mile, at least half a mile. And I was walking slowly, you know, giving the bees the chance to say, nah, it ain't worth it anymore. It was sunset. They should have gone home. No, they followed me. I had to get picked up in a truck, and then we would have to drive faster than a bee can fly. So we would have to drive on these dirt roads at least like 40 miles an hour, hope with the windows down, trying to get the bees to go out the truck. Some of them didn't, some of them did. And then we waited until it was dark before we actually entered our house because the bees were still mad in the in the backyard. So the best way to not get attacked by honeybees is to don't upset them in the first place, which is really hard. But remember, the bees will fly faster than you can run, and they don't like you more than you don't like them. And unfortunately, once you agitate the bees, they're a bunch of women. They hold grudges, and they will hold that grudge for 3 days. So once you've upset a hive, avoid them at all costs. Don't even try to bribe them with flowers and sugar. It isn't going to work. They're too mad for that. So they really have to be left alone to come down from their defensive alert. And unfortunately, every time you upset them, they will remember and add that onto the 3-day memory. So if you know where the bees are, you're not going back to look at them. You're not going back to photograph them. You're going to say, I remember where those bees are, put a pin in that, and we're not going to go there until we can get somebody to deal with that. Okay. Okay. Um, so I will repeat what she said in just a moment. So this is a quick video. This is one of the incidents we talk about a lot, because what had happened is that we got a call at 7 p.m., 6:30 p.m. The homeowners of this trailer house um, had bees in their home. The bees had attacked people, and somebody tried to spray them with poison. Didn't even get close. Upset the bees even more. Then the neighbor, right? The neighbor called the fire department, and the fire department came out, did their thing, and their thing is spraying water where the hive is. Unfortunately, sometimes it works and you spray the bees. In this case, it did the opposite of working. It was, nobody could, people can't hear you. um, yeah. So as Dawn was saying, they did not get close to the hive, not at all. Where they were spraying and what the bees were using as an entryway was several studs down. And so when the fire department tried to spray water or soap and water, it went down inside of the house and towards the ground, and not at all to the right where the bees actually were. And these bees had been so agitated by people trying to spray them with poison, people tried to spray them with water. A lot of people are getting stung, making noise. There was dogs. A dog even died, which of course is going to cry in the process, upsetting the bees even more. That you can see in this video how dark it was outside, and they were still very active. Bees don't see at night, and yet because we had enough light out that they could go to the light, they were still coming towards us, stinging. We could see them around lights. So when bees get upset, it's really important to avoid and let the bees calm down. Trying to deal with the bees, and you're not a beekeeper and you're not prepared to go in and rip it open and get the job done, can be very, very dangerous. Oops. Guess I have to hit next. Okay. So, bee safety. If you don't want to have a beekeeper come rescue you, there are a couple of things that you can do to keep yourself a little bit more protected as you're working outside, or if you're doing volunteer work, or if you're just maintaining your property, or just existing in nature. So there's a couple of different types of PPE that people working outside can use. Most of this stuff would not necessarily be applicable to you guys, but these are just examples of different options you have. So, for example, the best protection is a bee suit. There are different types of bee suits, and they offer different ranges of protection. So, for example, a simple cotton jumpsuit style bee suit, will it protect you? Yes. Will you sweat to death? Probably. And also, it is not going to give you the same protection as a professional grade bee suit made out of triple layer of a triple layer mesh fabric. That's also breathable, and you will only mildly sweat to death. The main things that most people are going to want to be looking for in terms of being safe around bees outdoors is going to be some sort of head protection. So that's going to be a hood or a veil, and it can be as simple as a mosquito netting that goes over a wide brim hat. That, if you can prevent bees from attacking your face with a mosquito netting, you're going to be way better off than the person who forgot their mosquito netting and is now trying to swat the bees and run away. Which, by the way, don't swat the bees, just walk away. When you're working, leather gloves are fantastic. You can also wear different types of PVC gloves, or even a nitrile glove, like a surgical glove, so long as it's thicker than 7 millimeters. Those are fantastic as well. Plus, I assume the bees think that it's an icky texture. They don't even want to sit on it, much less sting nitrile gloves. So that's always an option, especially if you know you're going to get your hands dirty. Anyways, those are fantastic. And I think one of the most important things that you can do is actually wear comfortable shoes that fit you well and that you're not going to trip when you're scared, frightened, don't know what you're doing, and trying to get away from the bees. If you have to worry about tripping over your boots that are too big, the bees aren't your problem at that point. It's your shoes. And then, of course, while you're working outside, the basic long pants, long sleeves are going to go a long way in comparison to somebody who's wearing basketball shorts and a tank top. Your best defense is a good offense, right? So you need to be aware of where you are at all times. The bees, they're defending their home. It's your goal not to run into their home. So you need to be aware of where you're going at all time. Africanized honeybees will still create colonies in high traffic human areas. So, for example, just because you've walked by this bush, this water meter, this house, this weird tree 1,000 times, that doesn't mean that the 1,001 time is going to be safe. You know, in between the last time you were there and this time, situations could have changed. There could have always been a beehive there, but maybe somebody was weed whipping and upset them. And how are you supposed to know? Well, you'll find out when you get stung by the bee. Or a new colony could have established themselves recently in an area that you frequented a lot. But in between then and now, they finally become large enough that they do have something to defend, and they will go after you because now they have a supply that they want to protect. In cold weather, a lot of people assume that bees either die off completely, kind of like bumblebees do, or solitary bees or wasps. That's not true for honeybees. They do, stick around during winter, and they don't hibernate like a lot of other mammals or insects do. They don't want to go outside because it's cold, and there's nothing to do outside anyways. But rest assured, if there's a colony in a tree, they'll overwinter in that tree and they'll be awake the whole time. So even during winter, when you're not seeing a lot of flight activity or any flight activity, just be wary that cavities, holes, weird tires, buckets in the ground, these can all contain bees. So, you know, you would still keep looking at these items even during winter, but maybe you're going to be spending a little bit more time, or if there's an object like a tire, uh, look at it, listen. So a lot of times if it's cold, you can actually hear the bees keeping the hive warm. You'll hear that subtle buzz. And when you encounter it once and you really listen to it, it'll be very easy to pick out again in the future. And it's just about training your ear. And you can train your ear by, if you know where a colony is, you can listen to it, or you can listen to videos of bees online. Bees have a very distinctive buzz that is completely different from flies and wasps. So it's one thing to consider practicing identifying that particular sound. It could save your life. So during the warmer weather, which is all the time here, when you're working outside, if you see honeybees outside, that's an obvious indication that there's a colony nearby. And by nearby, it could be within a 2.5-mile radius. So it's a lot of area that a bee can be in, but you know that they're somewhere. So if you see a bee foraging, you don't have to worry about that particular bee, but just be aware somewhere within 2 miles there's a colony. And in all likelihood, it's going to be a much closer than that 2 miles, of course. And there could be multiple colonies within that 2 miles as well. But when you start seeing bees not on a flower, you just see them flying. And when they're flying towards something and they have a goal and they look very focused and they're not moving and they're not taking it slow, then you know that there is probably an entry really, really close, or a very valuable water or food source. So typically when you are going to be looking at an object, a brush, a hole in a tree, and you start seeing in the air bees that are flying in a straight line, bees really only do that when they're going into their nest site. So the behavior is much different from a honeybee who's just kind of, I'm going to check that out. Oh, that's a nice flower. Maybe I'll get a sip of that water. A lot of times when bees are foraging, they're very calm and they sway. And when they're going home, they're like, get me out of here, man. I'm going home. And then, of course, if you're really close to a hive that's been very established, you might even find a dead animal in the vicinity. Unfortunately, we've done removals where we found a dead squirrel underneath a shed. Of course, we only found the dead animal after we opened the colony because we knew it was there. But had that squirrel been on the outside, you know, that's very possible too. Usually honeybees will not spend the energy or the time attacking small mammals. However, it's one extra little thing that you can be aware of. And then our favorite sign is, where is the honeybee? Oh, the wasp spray right there. If you see a can of wasp spray, I would just back away. Usually that means somebody tried and for sure failed to exterminate a honeybee colony, because those wasp sprays just are not very good. They only kill the bees if you spray them, and a lot of people can't even get close enough to do that. So if you see a can of wasp spray, walk away. It's not worth it. There's bees there. Now, once you've found your first swarm, they're typically not going to be very defensive. They're just going to be hanging out somewhere. Like I mentioned before, they're actually scouting out a new location to establish a colony. There are a couple of different ways that you can handle this. One of them is to leave them alone, let nature do its thing. Another one would be to contact somebody who can relocate them. A beekeeper is typically going to be your best option. There's a, you know, hobbyist beekeeper, professional beekeepers. A lot of people will relocate swarms and take them back to their own properties. And even though they're not very defensive at this point, if you have never handled bees or you don't know what you're doing with them, don't touch them. We all love our videos of people grabbing bees. I love to grab bees with a glove because I don't like being stung. But it is definitely not something that in the valley specifically, you just can't always get away with doing that. We don't have a lot of beekeepers in the valley. So when we see our beautiful swarms here, they're almost always going to be some degree of Africanized genetics. Once you start getting outside the valley and you're going to where the people live, you will encounter those beautiful European honeybees who don't care what you do with them. In the valley, we don't have that luxury here. Everything wants to kill us. And um, they kill us with love. So these bees are the least amount of danger to people. Of course, don't freak out about them. And typically they will move on within 48 hours. Now, there is a chance that the bees are indecisive or the weather is bad and they'll just stay there and they'll start building the nest. And once they start putting down comb, then they really don't want to move and then they'll just hang out and create what we call an open air colony. That is not very common, but that is a reason why we always suggest don't mess with the swarm, because if they are an open air colony, but they still kind of look like a swarm because you can't see their comb, once they put down that comb, they start to get more defensive, so don't touch them. And then once you encounter something that's possibly a colony, this is where you're really going to want to start being more careful with your actions. So a swarm, you can walk underneath it, you can, go to your car, you can walk around it, that's fine, so long as you aren't actually interacting with the swarm. When you think there's a colony around, you definitely have to be a bit more guarded because the bees sure are. You want to give that area plenty of space. If you're not sure that there's bees in it and you're safe to do so, which is the key, you can photograph it, document it. So if you're working outside doing volunteer work, you definitely want to document that where that is so you can share that information with other people, including what is the possible entry site, what are they in, where are they. I would keep track of what time of day you saw them, etc., because bee activity is different throughout the day. And you want to be calm and quiet. As I said before, bees are easily agitated by noise. And so if you're screaming or even talking too loud, it might get a bee to come out and investigate and be curious. And that curiosity could turn into a sting if maybe you accidentally swat it, or that bee's like, then they get afraid of you. So and then once one of them stings you, that draws out more. So you want to be as calm as possible. You want to walk away from them, ideally in the same direction as you came. Especially if you don't know exactly what they could be in, you don't want to risk, oh, I see some bees over there, so I'm going to walk this way, and then turns out, no, the bee was where you're stepping, and now you have bees everywhere. So walk from the exact same direction, if possible, that you came from, to avoid accidentally finding their real nest site or even a second nest site. And then, of course, there's a bunch of different options from there. You can call beekeepers. You can, if anybody owns bees and relocates bees, depending on what they're in, we don't recommend it, but of course, pest control is always an option. So there are different ways to mitigate bee risks once the bees have been found, but you definitely should not do it yourself. We don't recommend calling the fire department. This is true. Technically, it's an option, but they'll probably tell you no. So once you get stung, you tried your best, but you still got stung. There is no difference between Africanized bee venom and European bee venom. A lot of people think that, oh, they have more venom, or, oh, their venom is more potent. Technically, they have less venom, and their venom is just as potent as regular European honeybees, because once again, they're all still Apis mellifera. So the differences between them are very small, physically, literally very small. And of course, as we know, bees sting. When they sting, they die. Their venom sac gets ripped out, and one of the reasons it's so important to get that stinger out as quickly as possible, and you can scrape or pinch, pull it out. There actually is no difference of the amount of venom that goes in your body. It's just about time. But that barb will keep on, the venom will keep on pulsating into your skin, and that barb can go further into your skin. So you want to take it out for infection reasons and to minimize the amount of poison, venom in your body. And for humans, unless you're allergic, it actually takes a lot of venom in your body to cause venom toxicity. And that is really the thing that you worry about when you hear somebody, oh, they got stung hundreds of times, thousands of times, and they died. It's because of the venom toxicity. So it only takes 5 to 10 pounds, stings per pound of body weight. So if you're an adult that weighs only 100 pounds, it's only going to take 500 to 1,000 stings to kill you. If you are, if you're fluffy, you're good. You're golden. You can take a lot of stings. You are the champ. We have one thing going for us, and it's not dying from bees. All right. So and then the ratio goes down if you're younger or older. So for example, children, it can take less than 1 sting per pound of body weight if they're very small. This ratio really is only for adults. So so think between the ages of like 16 and 55 or so. Anything outside of that range, it's going to be a little bit more up in the air. And of course, with different people, you have different reactions. So this is not, I should preface this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. Don't sue me. This is just a guide. And so unfortunately, when you do get stung, the venom is not fun, but the pheromones that the bee will leave on you is a glowing target in the bee world that attracts more bees to come and sting you, because one bee clearly thought you were worth dying for, so that means everybody else should die too, within reason. And this can agitate not only the colony that you got stung by, but if there are other Africanized colonies within close proximity, that can also agitate them and create the most unfortunate domino effect. Yes, we have dealt with that within our own hives. We have a lot of Africanized bees and a lot of Africanized genetics in our own personal colonies. And we can be working with one colony, get them riled up and upset, and then the colony, several boxes down the line will start getting upset and stinging us too. And that's partly because of just their African nature, but also because they're so close that it doesn't matter at that point whose colony is being upset. Clearly, it's a threat to all of them, to all bees. So once you get stung, even just once, you definitely want to back away from the area. Don't run. You can't run that fast. Nobody can. And you want to make sure and get out of the area quietly and safely. You can cry a little bit. I give you permission. But try not to run screaming, yelling, swatting your face. You really want to try and resist the human nature to do that and just exit quietly. Once again, you want to go back the same way that you can, unless you know that there's shelter a little bit closer, like a vehicle or a shed or a house, something that you can hide in. You'll really want to focus on your face. It doesn't matter how many stings your body get. You'll be weird and lumpy, but as long as you protect your face, so your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and your throat down here, that is really what causes a lot of problems when humans get stung. Because in all likelihood, you're not going to set off a hive bad enough where you'll reach that venom toxicity. Your face is really going to induce shock, and physical swelling could prevent you from breathing. So cover your eyes. They know where your eyes are. They want to take out your eyes, and cover your anything that could restrict your breathing if you get stung there. As soon as possible, you want to get into a shelter. Even if you take in dozens, hundreds of bees with you, get in that shelter. Your best friend who's sitting in the passenger seat, I'm sorry, you're going to have to take one for the team. Typically, once you get inside of something, the bees will start to get confused and be less likely to sting you anyways. And thankfully, you can take it as good or bad. Most of the bees at that point who are going to be flying around you probably already stung you and are going to keep trying to sting you despite not having a stinger. It's just their instinct. Do not try to hide from the bees. No, don't go jump in a pool. Don't go jump in a river. No water. Don't sit in a bucket of water. Nothing. The bees will wait. They're patient. They know you're there. They can either physically still see you or, okay, she disappeared. There can only be one place she is. And so they're going to wait until you come out, and then they're all going to come and sting you. And especially if you're trying to wait in water, you cannot hold your breath that much. I'm sorry to break it to you, but you can't. The bees are going to sting you as soon as you pop up to breathe. And if you're lucky, you won't inhale bees. If you are normal, you will inhale the bees. And that once they start stinging your internal organs, you are in for a very, very bad time. You don't want to hide in a bush either. The bees can sting you. They even still see you. Don't hide in a bush. It will not work. Unless that bush was a blanket bush, I don't know, and you had a nice comforter and you can wrap yourself up like a little taco. They're gonna sting through the trees. They're gonna find you. You're not smarter than the bees. I'm sorry. None of us are. And once again, don't run. They fly over 35 miles an hour. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over some first aid basics. This is going to be the same for any sort of insect sting. Once again, not medical advice. So everybody has some sort of local, that is skin reaction to being stung. Most of the time it's very mild. It can just be like a little bit of itchiness for some people. For people who are stung a lot like us, we don't react at all. It doesn't even matter where it is anymore. We just don't swell up. You can't see anything. Most people are going to swell up to some degree. If you have, you're going to have various degrees of swelling. It's not necessarily something to be freaked out over, but it will happen. Most people will have a moderate to mild reaction to their first bee sting, and you will kind of get used to it over time. I don't recommend you purposely sting yourself all the time, but you will get used to it over time. Typically, a local reaction is going to be characterized by the swelling. It's going to be like a little red. It's definitely going to be itchy. And really, your treatment for a sting is going to be like a topical antihistamine. Take some Benadryl, put some nice cooling cream on the area, keep it nice and cool. And after, it depends on the person. After a couple hours, the swelling should start going down. If you don't know if you're allergic and you're not immediately gasping for air, you definitely want to be monitored by a friend, family, because some people will have a delayed anaphylactic reaction. So anytime you're stung by bees, even if you think you're not allergic, you need to inform people just so they can keep an eye on you. So your allergic reaction, of course, we know is a hypersensitivity to something, and it's your immune system kicking into gear to try to protect you. And with bee venom, there's just like other allergies, it has different stages. So we have mild allergies and we have severe allergies. Mild allergies are really going to be more like gastrointestinal distress, very uncomfortable things happening to your body that nobody wants to talk about. It can also be more extreme swelling. So a sting that you get sting on the arm, but then it starts swelling all the way up. That is definitely a sign that you either have a mild allergy or a bad venom intolerance. And so that definitely needs to be checked out by a doctor. But not every allergic reaction is necessarily going to be you fall on the floor, you can't breathe. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. And then, of course, anaphylaxis, we all know that one. That's the big scary one. Very few people are truly anaphylactic level allergic to honeybees. If you know you are, of course, carry your EpiPen, carry 2 EpiPens, make your friend carry 2 EpiPens too. You can never have enough of them. Because if you start going into this, you need medical treatment so fast. Somebody better be on, calling 911, getting you out of there. If somebody's having a reaction and there's still active bees, Hopefully there's some people who can take one for the team and get that person out of there. If you're a healthy adult and you can assist somebody, even taking a couple stings yourself, it is really important to get that person out so medical personnel can treat them. Especially if you can get them into some sort of shelter, because that can delay medical personnel, firefighters, EMS from getting to you if they have to start by donning some protective gear themselves in order to get you out. So, of course, anaphylaxis, the symptoms can start very slowly, or they can have a rapid onset. You really, of course, want to focus on, is the person able to breathe? Do they sound normal? Are they reporting any sort of difficulty breathing? They're going to probably feel chest pain. There'll be swelling both internally but possibly externally that you can see. Of course, the throat and the tongue will start to swell as well. And if the reaction is bad enough, they can start going in and out of consciousness. And of course, immediate medical attention. There really is no substitute for call the doctor or call the ambulance. And unfortunately, if you don't think you have an allergy or you've proven yourself to not have an allergy, you can develop it spontaneously. This happens a lot in beekeepers specifically, especially people who've been working with bees for a long time. Will go 30, 40, 50 years working with bees, and then one day you're absolutely dead allergic to bees. Somebody has to drag you out of their bee yard. So just be aware that allergies can develop spontaneously at any time, which is why it's always important to monitor yourself as soon as you get stung by a bee. So when it comes to toxic overdose, a lot of these things are call 911 and have a real doctor treat you. But of course, there are things that you can look for. The toxic overdose, you have to get stung a lot in a very short period of time, and it is a different. The effect it has on your body might seem similar to an allergy, but the reasons are differently, and that can make a huge difference when you're getting treated by medical professionals. So the amount of stings it takes to cause a lethal dose, once again, was that 5 to 10 pounds, 5 to 10 stings per pound body weight. So it takes a lot, fortunately. And it can have very mild symptoms for some people. So it can be fatigue, nausea, vomiting, things like that. And some of that is just you need to remove yourself from the situation, have time to calm down, seek your medical your medical intervention. And then, of course, it can quickly develop into hypertension, heart injuries, liver damage. This is if it's been untreated. The venom can do some very serious long-term damage to your body, even if it doesn't actually kill you, just if it hasn't been treated. And unfortunately, the venom can stick around in your body for a couple of days before your body truly breaks everything down and flushes it out, which is why it's important, if you do get attacked by bees, especially in a large number, not only should you be monitored for the next 4 hours, because that's when an allergic reaction will set in, but also for the next couple of days to make sure you don't have a really delayed reaction. Some bodies are weird. You can be okay the first day, and then the second day you're really struggling and you have to go to the ER. So it's very important to be monitored for several days after being attacked by a number of bees. And then just for the casual bee sting, just the one bee sting, assuming you're not allergic or having any bad reaction, the over-the-counter medications that you think will help probably will. So you're going to take your antihistamines, your general swelling reducers. I would put some sort of anti-itch cream on the area, especially if you're not used to bug bites and it's very irritating. Once again, any of these mild reactions also may not be immediate. Some people, they happen immediately. Some people, it isn't until the end of the day, and you're like, oh, what's that weird bump? Oh, yeah, I got stung by a bee. And after you get stung, assuming you're not immediately having to go to the doctor, just make sure you wash it as soon as you get to some sort of shelter or area where you're not being attacked by the bees anymore. Washing it will keep from alerting or upsetting other bees because of that pheromone that is left on the skin, or can be wiped onto the skin even if you remove the stinger. So wash the area before you go back outside. And then this is just kind of like the same thing over. If you have allergies to bees and you know it, you really need to make sure whoever you're with is very aware. If you carry an EpiPen, you need to know, you need to make sure all, okay, speed run. So just make sure the people that you're working with are aware of how to use your EpiPen. And they've had a chance to practice with maybe a dummy EpiPen, or they've received some sort of first aid training. That would be ideal. But as long as they at least know that, hey, I'm allergic, this is what you need to do. That could save not only your life, but somebody's life who doesn't even know they're allergic, because then that person is already aware of what to do. And of course, if you're working with friends, or if you're out with a company, things like that, know where your first aid stuff is. So if you keep your own personal first aid in a purse, in a truck, or whatnot, make sure everybody knows how to access it, where it is. That can save a life. And then a brief overview of wasps and hornets. All those venoms are different. So bee, wasp, and hornet venom are all different. If you're allergic to bees, you're probably not allergic to wasp and hornets, but you could be unlucky and be allergic to all three. In Texas, we actually don't have any hornets. We have a wasp called a bald-faced hornet, but it's a wasp. And so the treatment for wasp and hornet stings are pretty much exactly the same as for bees and generally most other insects in general. Oh, but wasps and hornets can sting multiple times, so good luck.
I was asking, do they have like a temperature range where they're dormant?
Not really. Pretty much, if it's too cold for them to fly, so under 50 degrees Fahrenheit, they're not going to be going outside, but they will be awake and active in their nest all 12 months of the year. Oh, yes, and we've dealt with active swarms and colonies in 40-degree weather down here in South Texas. You did a swarm the day after Christmas. We've done a swarm right before New Year's, right after New Year's. So for better or worse, here in South Texas, there is no off season for bees.
So they can and will be just as aggressive in cold weather as in warm weather?
Defensive, and they're not aggressive, they're defensive, and the weather does have a physical impact on them. So for example, if it's under 70 degrees, they really don't want to go outside, but they will. But if it's under 50 degrees, it's almost physically impossible for them to fly. So for example, if you step in their nest, for example, they could climb up your body and sting you much easier than they could fly out of their nest to come and attack you if, let's say, you're mowing your lawn. That isn't to say they won't do it. It's just physically harder for them to do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And the same with rain. They don't like flying in the rain. It's dangerous to them. Not to say they won't do it if they're scared enough, but it greatly reduces the risk. Oh, yes. Yeah, so what those bees are doing is right now we're in what's a nectar dearth. So there's some flowers blooming right now, but not a lot. So your hummingbird feeders are really going to be very attractive to bees, usually in early spring, late winter to like about right now, towards the fallish. They're really going to go after any sugar. Those were absolutely Africanized bees. Unless you had bees, they didn't sting you exactly because they're not defending anything. What they're doing is they're getting food. They have a mission in and out. They're not going to attack you for that. Yes, all of our bees are Africanized, and unless it's your bees in your box and you've seen your queen, and ideally you've marked her, like putting a little dot on her to show that you've bred her or bought her, they're going to be some level of Africanized. The genetics can be pure, very pure, or very diverse.
And with that, we're going to have to stop. We have to get out of here by 8 o'clock. So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, yes, I will pass out. I'll bring some business cards. I also have some honey samples for you guys. But I have a business card that has our website. Not only does it have our contact information where you can call or email us, but on our website, I do have a lot of information, including some little trifold brochures that you can download and read.
And follow their Facebook page. They have really great videos, stories about their experiences. It's really, really interesting to follow.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Sorry,
Really enjoyed it.
I talked too much.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
quite all right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me see if I can get this on.